Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a pretty fascinating journey back in time, all the way to January 8th, 1900, in Los Angeles. We're going to unpack a historic and honestly truly mind-bending lecture given by Swami Vivekananda titled The Powers of Mind. Basically, what we're doing today is uncovering the hidden, natural laws behind what most of us would simply call, well, magic. If you've ever felt like your thoughts have real power, or you've wondered why some people just have this undeniable magnetic presence, you are in exactly the right place. Let's dive in.
Section 1. The Illusion of Magic and Historical Phenomena.
So let's start by looking at some historical events that completely defy logical explanation. Stuff that looks like pure, impossible magic. I want you to think about that for a second. Do you believe in mind reading? What about miracles? I know it's super easy to dismiss these things as pure fantasy today, especially if you're a bit of a skeptic, like me. But what happens when highly educated people witness them firsthand? Well, that's exactly the stage Vivekananda sets for us with some unbelievable personal accounts.
Check out these specific events Vivekananda personally witnessed and documented. First off, he and his friends visited a man who claimed he could read minds. To test him, they wrote their questions on a piece of paper, folded it up, and hid it in their pockets before they even walked into the room. Immediately, the man recited their questions word for word and answered them. No way, right? Then he asked Vivekananda to think of a poem in literally any language. Vivekananda, wanting to make this incredibly difficult, thought of a long, complex verse in Sanskrit, a language the man clearly did not know. Yet the man perfectly reproduced the entire Sanskrit verse on paper. Later on, in Hyderabad, Vivekananda met a highly respected merchant who arrived wearing nothing but a simple loincloth. In a room packed with 25 highly skeptical witnesses, they handed this merchant a list of bizarre, foreign, out-of-season fruits. And right in front of their eyes, out of thin air, he materialized heaps of those exact fruits and basically told everyone to dig in. When they asked him how on earth he did it, the merchant humbly called it sleight of hand. But Vivekananda knew better. He knew it was something much, much deeper.
Section 2. The Universal Mind and Discovering Our Connection. To transition from these wild, seemingly magical anecdotes to actual, concrete science, we have to look at Vivekananda's core thesis. It's summed up perfectly here. It's all the power of the mind. He argued that as modern civilization grew and we became utterly obsessed with physical and material sciences, we lost touch with the psychic sciences. But ancient India didn't just wave these events off as supernatural miracles. Actually, they studied them scientifically, through really rigorous experimentation, calling the science Raja Yoga. They discovered that just like gravity or friction, the mind operates on distinct natural laws. These powers aren't magic, they can be learned, practiced, and completely mastered.
And that brings us to a seriously revolutionary concept. Ancient yogis concluded that the mind is not just some isolated individual thing trapped inside your skull. Instead, think of a vast interconnected ocean of consciousness. Your mind, my mind, everyone's mind, they are all just tiny waves on the surface of this massive ocean called the universal mind. Because we're all connected to this exact same ocean, a thought can originate in one mind, travel as a subtle vibration, and be instantly received by another mind somewhere else. It's like an invisible, microscopic communication network running 24/7. This is exactly why you sometimes know exactly what a loved one is feeling without them saying a single word. Your minds are literally communicating through these subtle vibrations.
Section 3. Personal Magnetism and the Secret Energy. So how does this universal connection actually impact you and me on, say, a random Tuesday morning at the office? Think about this communication breakdown. Have you ever listened to a speaker who has perfect grammar, highly polished words, and a flawless intellect, but they just leave you feeling completely cold? Then someone else walks in. Maybe they barely speak. Maybe their grammar's terrible. But the absolute moment they open their mouth, they completely capture your heart and command the room. According to Vivekananda, the words, the intellect, the conscious thought, that only accounts for about 1/3 of your impact. The other 2/3, that is entirely your energy, your personal magnetism, your unspoken vibration that is actively interacting with the universal mind. This totally flips how we usually think about self-improvement. We spend so much time externally polishing ourselves, right? Learning the right buzzwords, wearing the right clothes. But true education, true leadership requires building that internal personal power. When a person develops this immense internal energy, they can move massive crowds of people and achieve their goals almost effortlessly, simply through the invisible weight of their presence.
Section 4. The 3 Dimensions and the Layers of Existence. To really understand where this immense personal power actually comes from, we have to look at the mechanics of our existence. Our existence is layered. It starts with the physical dimension, which is the grossest or most dense layer. Then comes the mental dimension, which is finer. And finally, the spiritual dimension, which is the absolute finest. Crucially, these aren't three separate, disconnected worlds you travel between. They are a continuous, tapering existence. They exist all at once, in the exact same place, at the exact same time. And the universal rule here is that the finer dimension always controls the grosser one.
Think about the comparison between a physical bicep and the mind. Imagine a weightlifter lifting a massive amount of iron. When we watch them, we think, wow, look at the power of those physical muscles. But Vivekananda points out that the muscle is just a gross physical effect. The real, unseen source of that power comes from the microscopic, fine nerves firing inside the body. If you cut the nerve, that massive muscle is utterly useless. But where do those nerves get their power? From an even finer dimension, the mental thought, the intention. And that thought draws its power from the finest source of all, the spiritual dimension, the soul. The true power always originates from the unseen, fine layers, and simply manifests in our physical world as an effect.
Section 5. Mastering your mind and controlling this power. If the real power lies in the unseen layers of our minds, how do we actually apply this practically? Well, follow this progression to see how a thought really works. It starts at a subtle root source, moves into an energetic vibration, forms into a conscious thought you recognize, and finally bursts outward into a physical action. So here's the kicker. We usually only notice our thoughts when they reach the very end of this timeline. We only become aware of our anger, our fear, or our desires when they have already become massive, overwhelming physical actions. Because they've gathered so much momentum by the time we actually notice them, we throw our hands up and say, I have absolutely no control over my mind or my life. The real secret to mastering your mind's power is learning to catch the thought at its absolute root, in its subtlest form, long before it ever becomes an action. Now, this requires intense awareness. If your mind is filled with complaints, jealousy, or worry, it's virtually impossible to focus deeply enough to see these subtle roots. That is exactly why purity and morality are so heavily emphasized in Raja Yoga. They aren't just arbitrary old-school rules. They are practical, vital tools to quiet the mind. Once the mind is quiet, you can spot a negative thought like a tiny bubble forming at the very bottom of the ocean, and you can neutralize it instantly before it ever becomes a tidal wave.
Mastering your own mind and uncovering your spiritual dimension is for sure not an easy task. It takes incredible focus, because the moment you try to watch your mind, it constantly tries to slip away. But the benefits of doing this work, they are literally infinite. You tap into that universal mind, you build undeniable personal magnetism, and you finally stop being a victim of your own runaway thoughts. So knowing that every single thought you have sends a ripple out into the vast, interconnected ocean of consciousness, what thoughts will you choose to feed into the universal mind today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you seeing your own potential in a completely new light.